You found this video at exactly the right moment, and that's not an accident. Right now, as you're watching these words appear on your screen, something extraordinary is happening in your energy field. Something that 97% of people completely miss because they're looking for transformation in all the wrong places. They're waiting for external signs, checking their bank accounts, refreshing their phones, scanning their environment for proof that change is coming. But what I'm about to reveal will completely shift how you recognize the most powerful indicator that your quantum leap is not just approaching, it's already begun. This isn't about manifestation techniques or positive thinking. This is about understanding the energetic signature that appears right before reality reorganizes itself around you. And here's what's fascinating. The sign I'm talking about has been documented by quantum physicists, studied by neuroscientists, and experienced by every person who's ever made a dramatic breakthrough in their life. Yet most people interpret it as something negative, something to avoid, something that means they're going backwards. But they couldn't be more wrong. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what this sign feels like, why it appears, and most importantly, how to recognize it so you don't sabotage your breakthrough when it's happening. Because here's the thing, this sign doesn't feel good. In fact, it feels like the opposite of what you'd expect before a major life transformation. Most people think quantum leaps feel exciting, energizing, like everything's finally falling into place. But the real sign, the one that actually precedes every genuine transformation, feels more like everything is falling apart. And that's precisely why most people miss their moment. But before we dive into what this feels like, let me explain why this happens from a scientific perspective. Because once you understand the mechanics, you'll never interpret this sign the same way again. In quantum physics, there's a principle called quantum tunneling. It describes how particles can pass through energy barriers that should be impossible to cross according to classical physics. The particle doesn't gradually build up enough energy to climb over the barrier. Instead, it suddenly appears on the other side, having tunneled through in a way that defies our normal understanding of reality. Your consciousness works exactly the same way. When you're about to make a quantum leap in your life, your awareness doesn't gradually climb from one level to another. It tunnels through the barrier between your current reality and your expanded reality. But here's the crucial part. During the tunneling process, you exist in what physicists call a superposition state. You're neither fully in your old reality nor your new one. You're suspended between dimensions of possibility. And that suspension feels incredibly uncomfortable. Dr. Joe Dispenza has documented this phenomenon in his research on brainwave patterns during transformation. He found that right before people experience breakthrough moments, their neural activity shows a specific signature. The old neural networks that supported their previous identity begin to destabilize, but the new networks haven't fully formed yet. This creates what he calls neural chaos. Your brain is literally rewiring itself, but during the rewiring process, you feel disconnected from both who you were and who you're becoming. Now, most people experience this and think something's wrong. They think they're having a mental breakdown, going through a difficult phase, or moving in the wrong direction. So they try to get back to familiar territory, back to what feels safe and known. But that's exactly the wrong move, because this discomfort isn't a sign that you're off track. It's a sign that you're right on track. It's evidence that your consciousness is preparing to quantum tunnel into a completely different version of reality. Let me give you a practical example. Sarah was working a corporate job that drained her energy every single day. For years, she dreamed of starting her own business, but she kept making excuses. The timing wasn't right, she didn't have enough savings, she needed more experience. Then something shifted. She started feeling increasingly agitated at work. Tasks that used to be manageable became unbearable. She felt restless, anxious, like she was trapped in a life that didn't fit anymore. Her sleep patterns changed. She found herself questioning everything, wondering if she was having some kind of midlife crisis. Most people in her situation would have doubled down on their current path, maybe taken a vacation, tried to adjust their attitude, or seen a therapist to help them cope with their dissatisfaction. But Sarah recognized what was happening. She was experiencing the quantum dis was really comfort zone. Her consciousness was preparing to tunnel through to a completely different version of her life. Instead of resisting the discomfort, she leaned into it. She used it as fuel to finally take the leap she'd been postponing for years. Within 6 months, she had launched her business. Within a year, she had replaced her corporate income. Within 2 years, she had built something that generated more money in a month than her old job paid in a year. The discomfort wasn't a problem to solve. It was information to act on. Now, I want to be crystal clear about something. Not all discomfort is a sign of impending quantum leap. There's a specific quality to this feeling that distinguishes it from regular stress, anxiety, or dissatisfaction. The quantum discomfort zone has 3 distinct characteristics. First, it's accompanied by an inexplicable sense of urgency. You feel like time is running out, like you need to make a change now, even though you can't logically explain why. This urgency isn't based on external deadlines or pressures. It's an internal knowing that your current trajectory is no longer sustainable. Second, it comes with increased sensitivity to your environment. Things that used to be tolerable suddenly feel overwhelming. Conversations that used to be fine now drain your energy. Places that used to be comfortable now feel suffocating. It's as if your energetic boundaries have become more refined, and you can no longer ignore what doesn't align with your emerging truth. Third, and this is the most important one, it's paired with glimpses of possibility that feel both exciting and terrifying. You start having visions or ideas about what your life could become, but these visions feel so different from your current reality that they seem impossible, yet they won't leave you alone. This combination, urgency plus sensitivity plus impossible visions, creates a very specific energetic signature. And you feel all 3 simultaneously. You're not having a breakdown, you're having a breakthrough. But here's where most. They feel people get stuck this discomfort and immediately try to make it go away. They distract themselves, numb themselves, or convince themselves they're being unrealistic. They interpret the discomfort as evidence that they should stay where they are, that change is too risky, that they should be grateful for what they have. This is like a butterfly trying to crawl into its chrysalis, because the back of process, the growing wings, feels uncomfortable. The discomfort you're feeling isn't your enemy, it's your ally. It's your consciousness telling you that you've outgrown your current container, and it's time to expand into something larger. Marcus, a client of mine, described it perfectly. He said it felt like wearing clothes that were 3 sizes too small. Everything about his life, his job, his relationships, his daily routines felt constraining. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't focus on tasks that used to engage him. He felt like he was suffocating in his own existence. For months, he tried to fix the feeling. He changed his diet, started exercising more, practiced meditation, even taking medication considered for anxiety. Nothing worked because he was treating the symptom instead of recognizing the message. The message was simple. You're ready for your next evolution. Once Marcus stopped trying to eliminate the discomfort and started listening to what it was telling him, everything changed. The restlessness wasn't random. It was pointing him towards specific areas of his life that needed transformation. The sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was his intuition becoming more refined. The impossible visions weren't delusions. They were previews of what was trying to emerge through him. Within months, he had made changes that completely transformed his reality. New career, new relationship, new city, new identity. From the outside, it looked like sudden, dramatic change. But from his perspective, it was simply his external world finally catching up to the internal shift that had been building for months. This is how quantum leaps actually work. They're not sudden events that happen to you. They're natural expressions of internal pressure that's been building beneath the surface of your awareness. Think of it like a volcano. From the outside, an eruption appears sudden and unexpected. But beneath the surface, pressure has been building for years, decades, sometimes centuries. The eruption isn't the beginning of the process, it's the culmination of a process that's been happening all along. Your quantum leap works the same way. The discomfort you're feeling isn't the start of your transformation, it's the signal that your transformation has reached critical mass and is ready to express itself in physical form. But there's a crucial window here, a moment of choice that determines whether you'll tunnel through to your new reality or collapse back into your familiar patterns. This crucial window appears when the pressure reaches its peak intensity. Most people describe it as feeling like they're standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing they need to jump, but terrified of what happens next. Your logical mind starts generating 1,000 reasons why you should step back from the edge, why you should wait for better conditions, why you should choose safety over uncertainty. But here's what nobody tells you about this moment. The fear you're feeling isn't fear of failure. It's fear of success. It's fear of becoming who you're meant to be. Because deep down, some part of you knows that once you make this leap, there's no going back. The person you've been, the life you've known, the identity you've constructed, it all has to dissolve to make space for what's emerging. This is why the quantum discomfort zone feels so intense. You're not just changing your circumstances, you're changing your fundamental relationship with reality itself. Dr. Bruce Lipton's research on cellular biology reveals something fascinating about this process. He discovered that cells go through a similar transformation when they're ready to evolve. Right before a cell divides and creates new life, it enters what he calls the chaos phase. The cellular structure becomes unstable, the membrane becomes permeable, and for a brief moment, the cell exists in a state of organized chaos. During this chaos phase, the cell is incredibly vulnerable. It could either successfully divide and create new life, or it could collapse and die. The determining factor isn't the cell's circumstances. It's whether the cell has enough energy to complete the transformation process. Your consciousness operates on exactly the same principle. When you're in the quantum discomfort zone, you're in your chaos phase. Your old identity structures are becoming unstable, your energetic boundaries are becoming permeable, and you exist in a state of organized chaos. You're vulnerable, yes, but you're also more powerful than you've ever been. Because in this state, you have access to possibilities that simply don't exist within the confines of your normal identity. But like the cell, you need sufficient energy to complete the transformation. And this is where most people fail. They try to manage the process from their thinking mind, using willpower and strategy and planning, but the thinking mind is part of the old system that's dissolving. You can't navigate a quantum leap with the same consciousness that created your current reality. Instead, you need to learn to operate from what I call quantum intuition. This isn't the gentle nudges and subtle feelings most people associate with intuition. This is direct knowing that bypasses thought entirely. It's the intelligence that beats your heart, grows your fingernails, and orchestrates the dance of billions of cells in your body without any conscious effort from you. This intelligence knows exactly how to navigate your transformation. It knows which opportunities to pursue, which relationships to release, which risks to take, which doors to walk through. But it doesn't communicate through analysis or reasoning. It communicates through energy, through feeling, through sudden knowing that defies explanation. Jennifer experienced this during her own quantum leap. She had been feeling the discomfort zone intensifying for weeks. Her marriage felt suffocating, her career felt meaningless, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was living someone else's life. Every morning she woke up with a growing sense of panic, like she was running out of time for something she couldn't identify. Then one Tuesday afternoon, while sitting in another pointless meeting at work, something shifted. She described it as a moment of absolute clarity that came from nowhere. She knew, without any doubt, that she needed to leave her job, end her marriage, and move across the country to pursue a completely different path. The knowing was so strong, so undeniable, that she couldn't ignore it. Her logical mind immediately started protesting. She had no savings for such a drastic change. She had no concrete plan for what she would do. She had no guarantees that things would work out. But the knowing was stronger than the fear. Within 3 months, she had quit her job, filed for divorce, and moved to a city where she knew nobody. Within 6 months, she had started a business doing work she was passionate about. Within a year, she was earning more money than she ever had, in a relationship that felt like a fairy tale, living in a way that aligned with her deepest values. The leap looked impossible from her old perspective. But from the perspective of her quantum intuition, every step was perfectly orchestrated. This is the paradox of quantum transformation. It requires you to act on information you can't verify, to make decisions that don't make sense, to trust a process you can't understand. It asks you to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, to find certainty within uncertainty, to discover safety in the unknown. Most people never develop this capacity because they're too busy trying to think their way through life. They want guarantees before they act, proof before they believe, evidence before they trust. But quantum leaps don't work that way. They require faith, not in some external deity or force, but in the intelligence that created you and continues to operate through you every moment. This intelligence has been preparing for your quantum leap long before you became consciously aware of it. It's been orchestrating synchronicities, arranging encounters, creating circumstances that would activate your discontent with the status quo. Every challenge you've faced, every disappointment you've endured, every moment of frustration you've experienced has been preparing you for this transition. Nothing in your life has been random. Everything has been purposeful, even the parts that felt meaningless or painful at the time. Your quantum leap isn't separate from your history. It's the culmination of your history, the flowering of seeds that were planted years or even decades ago. This is why the discomfort feels so familiar, even though the circumstances are new. Some part of you recognizes this energy because you've been building toward this moment your entire life. Every choice you've made, every path you've taken, every detour you've endured has been leading you to this threshold. And now you're here, standing at the edge of becoming, feeling the pressure of transformation building in your cells, your nervous system, your energy field. The old world is dissolving behind you. The new world is calling from ahead of you. And you exist in the space between worlds, in the quantum field of infinite possibility. This is your moment. Not tomorrow when you feel more ready. Not next week when you have a better plan. Not next month when circumstances are more favorable. Right now, in this precise instant, while the portal is open and your consciousness is primed for transformation. The question isn't whether you're capable of making this leap. You wouldn't be feeling this discomfort if you weren't ready. The question is whether you'll trust the process enough to surrender to it. Because surrender is the opposite of what your conditioned mind wants to do. Your ego is screaming that this is dangerous, that you need more information, that you should wait for a clearer sign. But surrender isn't giving up. It's giving in to the intelligence that's been orchestrating this entire process. Think about how a seed transforms into a tree. At some seed must completely point, to dissolve its current form to become something entirely new. It doesn't gradually become a tree while remaining a seed. The seed identity must die for the tree identity to be born. There's no halfway point, no compromise position, no gradual transition. It's a complete metamorphosis. You're at that same dissolution point. The identity you've been carrying, the story you've been telling about who you are and what's possible for you, is ready to dissolve. But unlike the seed, you get to choose whether to resist the process or collaborate with it. Resistance feels like fighting against the current of your own evolution. You'll find yourself making desperate attempts to fix your old life rather than stepping into your new one. You'll try to make relationships work that have outgrown their purpose. You'll attempt to reignite passion for work that no longer feeds your soul. You'll exhaust yourself trying to force enthusiasm for activities that once brought joy but now feel hollow. This is what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, but it's really energetic dissonance. Your consciousness is vibrating at a new frequency, but you're trying to maintain the old patterns. It's like trying to play a symphony on an instrument that's been retuned. The music sounds off because the frequencies no longer match. Collaboration, on the other hand, feels like flowing with an invisible current that's carrying you exactly where you need to go. You stop trying to make sense of everything and start trusting your energetic responses to people, places, and opportunities. You notice which situations energize you and which drain you. You pay attention to which conversations light you up and which leave you feeling depleted. Michael discovered this during his transformation. He was a successful lawyer who had built what everyone else considered an enviable life. But for months, he'd been waking up with a knot in his stomach, dreading another day of work he no longer found meaningful. His relationships felt superficial. His achievements felt empty. Even his hobbies had lost their appeal. Instead of pushing through the discomfort, he started paying attention to it. He noticed that certain activities still sparked something inside him. Writing, which he'd abandoned after law school, still made time disappear. Conversations about social justice still ignited his passion. Working with underprivileged youth still filled him with purpose. These weren't random interests, they were breadcrumbs leading him toward his quantum leap. When he stopped trying to fix his old life and started following these energetic breadcrumbs, a path began to reveal itself. Opportunities appeared that he never could have planned or predicted. A chance encounter led to a conversation about starting a non-profit. A random email led to funding that materialized seemingly out of nowhere. Within 18 months, he had transitioned from corporate law to running an organization that provided legal services to communities that couldn't afford representation. His income initially dropped by 70%, but his sense of fulfillment increased exponentially. 2 years later, his organization had grown to the point where he was earning more than he ever had as a corporate lawyer. But now the money felt like a byproduct of purpose rather than the purpose itself. The path wasn't logical. It emerged through following his energy, trusting his instincts, and acting on opportunities that felt aligned even when they didn't make rational sense. This is how quantum navigation works. You don't plan your way into a new reality. You feel your way into it. You develop sensitivity to the subtle energetic currents that are constantly flowing around you, and you learn to distinguish between the currents that lead toward expansion and those that lead toward contraction. Expansion currents feel like yes in your body, even when your mind is generating reasons to say no. They create a sense of aliveness, curiosity, excitement mixed with nervousness. They make you feel more like yourself, not less. Contraction currents feel like no in your body, even when your mind thinks you should say yes. They create heaviness, obligation, resentment, or numbing. They make you feel like you're pretending to be someone you're not. During your quantum discomfort zone, these energetic signals become amplified. What used to be subtle nudges become impossible to ignore. This heightened sensitivity isn't a burden. It's a gift. It's your consciousness giving you a more precise navigation system for the transition ahead. But here's what most people don't realize about this navigation system. It requires a fundamental shift in how you make decisions. You can't rely primarily on logical analysis anymore. Logic is based on past data, and you're moving into a future that has no precedent in your experience. You need to learn to make decisions from presence, from feeling, from a knowing that emerges in the moment, rather than from thinking that processes historical information. This shift terrifies the analytical mind because it feels like losing control. But you're not losing control. You're gaining access to a more sophisticated form of intelligence. The same intelligence that orchestrates the migration patterns of birds, the blooming cycles of flowers, the precise timing of cellular division in your body. This intelligence doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't lead you astray. It doesn't abandon you in the middle of your transformation. But it does require trust in ways that your rational mind finds uncomfortable. Lisa learned this lesson during her career transition. She had been working in finance for 15 years when the quantum discomfort zone hit. Every day at work became increasingly unbearable. She found herself daydreaming about completely different careers, none of which made financial sense given her experience and education. One persistent vision kept returning. She saw herself working with animals, specifically in wildlife rehabilitation. She had no background in biology, no experience with animal care, no clear path from finance to wildlife work. Her analytical mind dismissed it as a midlife fantasy. But the vision wouldn't leave her alone. She started volunteering at a local animal rescue on weekends. The work energized her in ways that finance never had. She found herself researching wildlife rehabilitation programs, even though she had no intention of actually pursuing them. Then synchronicities began appearing. She met someone at a coffee shop who happened to run a wildlife rehabilitation center and was looking for someone with business skills to help with operations. A friend mentioned a graduate program in conservation biology that offered scholarships for career changes. Her company offered a voluntary early retirement package that would provide financial support during a career transition. Each synchronicity felt like a breadcrumb on a path she couldn't see clearly, but somehow knew she was meant to follow. Against all logical advice from friends and family, she took the early retirement, enrolled in the graduate program, and began working part-time at the wildlife center. The transition wasn't smooth. There were months of financial uncertainty, moments of doubt, challenges she hadn't anticipated. But throughout the process, she felt more aligned with herself than she ever had. The discomfort of uncertainty felt different from the discomfort of misalignment. One was growing pains, the other was soul death. 3 years later, she was directing her own wildlife rehabilitation program, earning less money, but experiencing more fulfillment than she thought possible. Looking back, she could see how every step had been perfectly orchestrated, even the parts that felt chaotic or uncertain at the time. This is the retrospective clarity that comes after successfully navigating a quantum leap. From the other side, you can see how intelligently the process unfolded, how every challenge was actually guidance, how every detour was actually a more direct route to where you needed to be. But while you're in the middle of it, while you're in that quantum discomfort zone, it feels like chaos. It feels like everything is falling apart. It feels like you're making a terrible mistake. And this is exactly how it's supposed to feel. The discomfort isn't evidence that something's wrong. It's evidence that something's right. It's your old identity structure dissolving to make space for your new one. It's your nervous system recalibrating to handle higher frequencies of energy. It's your reality field reorganizing itself around a completely different set of possibilities. Most people try to minimize this discomfort, to make the process smoother and more comfortable. But attempting to make transformation comfortable is like trying to give birth without labor pains. The discomfort isn't an unfortunate side effect of the process. It's an integral part of the process. The pressure creates the diamond. The heat creates the steel. The resistance creates the strength. Without the intensity of the quantum discomfort zone, you wouldn't develop the capacity to maintain your new reality once you reach it. Think about it this way. If your quantum leap was easy and comfortable, you'd still be operating from the same consciousness that created your current situation. You'd simply be rearranging the furniture in the same room rather than moving into an entirely different house. The discomfort forces you to develop new capacities. It stretches your tolerance for uncertainty. It expands your ability to trust invisible processes. It strengthens your connection to intuitive intelligence. It builds your faith in your own resilience and resourcefulness. These aren't just nice qualities to have. They're essential operating systems for the level of reality you're moving into. Without them, you'd either never make the leap, or you'd make it, but then collapse back into familiar patterns because you didn't have the internal infrastructure to sustain the transformation. This is why some people seem to make dramatic changes in their lives only to end up recreating similar situations with different details. They made external changes without internal transformation. They rearranged their circumstances. You're without evolving their consciousness. Quantum discomfort zone ensures that doesn't happen to you. It's forcing internal transformation first. The external changes will follow naturally once your consciousness has stabilized at its new level of operation. But there's a timing element here that's crucial to understand. The quantum discomfort zone has phases, and each phase requires a different response. Early phases feel like general restlessness and dissatisfaction. Middle phases intensify into urgent need for change. Late phases become almost unbearable pressure that demands immediate action. Most people make the mistake of trying to take action during the early phases when the real work is internal preparation, or they wait too long and miss the optimal window for external action during the late phases. Sarah Jessica, a client who successfully navigated her quantum leap, described these phases perfectly. She said the early phase felt like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit anymore, uncomfortable but manageable. The middle phase felt like wearing clothes that were clearly too small, restrictive and increasingly difficult to tolerate. The late phase felt like wearing clothes that were cutting off her circulation, impossible to ignore and dangerous to maintain. Each phase was preparing her for the next level of action. Early phase was for internal questioning and exploration. Middle phase was for research and preparation. Late phase was for decisive action and commitment to change. Trying to force action during the early phase would have been premature. The internal foundation wasn't ready yet. Waiting past the late phase would have meant missing the energetic window when transformation was most supported by universal forces. This is why developing sensitivity to these phases is so important. You need to know when to be patient with the process and when to act decisively. You need to recognize the difference between resistance that's protecting you from premature action and resistance that's preventing you from necessary action. The key is learning to feel into the quality of the energy behind your hesitation. Does it feel like wise caution or paralyzing fear? Does it feel like divine timing or procrastination? Does it feel like internal preparation or avoidance of growth? These distinctions become clearer as you develop what I call quantum discernment. This isn't the analytical discernment that weighs pros and cons. This is energetic discernment that feels into the life force behind different options and choices. Options that are aligned with your quantum leap carry a different energetic signature than options that will keep you stuck. Aligned options feel alive, even when they're scary. They generate energy rather than depleting it. They create expansion in your chest, even when your mind is listing all the reasons they won't work. Misaligned options feel dead, even when they appear safe. They drain your life force. They create contraction in your body, even when your mind insists they're the responsible choice. During the quantum discomfort zone, this distinction becomes impossible to ignore. Your system is so sensitive that you can feel the difference between life-giving and life-draining choices within seconds of considering them. But here's where it gets tricky. Sometimes the aligned choice feels terrifying precisely because it's so alive. Your nervous system, which has been calibrated to your old reality, interprets this aliveness as danger. It triggers fight or flight responses because it doesn't recognize this new frequency as safe. This is why many people misinterpret their quantum leap signals. They feel the terror of aliveness and assume it means they're making the wrong choice. They retreat back to the familiar deadness because it feels safer, not realizing that what feels safe is actually what's slowly killing their soul. Rachel experienced this confusion during her transition. She had been married for 12 years to someone who was kind, reliable, and completely wrong for who she was becoming. The relationship felt like slow suffocation, but leaving felt like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. For months, she tortured herself trying to decide. Her logical mind created elaborate lists of pros and cons. Her emotional mind swung between guilt and resentment. But when she finally learned to feel into the energetic signature of each choice, the answer became clear. Staying in the marriage felt like death by 1,000 cuts, slow, steady depletion of her life force. Leaving felt like terror mixed with electric aliveness. Her system was afraid of the unknown, but it was energized by the possibility. The fear wasn't warning her away from the wrong choice. It was her nervous system's natural response to encountering a frequency it had never experienced before. Like an immune to something system response foreign, even when that foreign element is actually beneficial. This is one of the most counterintuitive aspects of quantum transformation. The thing you're most afraid of is often exactly what you need to move toward. Not because fear is a reliable guide, but because your old identity structure naturally fears anything that threatens its existence. Your ego isn't evil or wrong for creating this fear. It's doing its job, which is to maintain the status quo and keep you alive. But its definition of staying alive is remaining the same, and your soul's definition of staying alive is continuing to grow and evolve. This creates an internal conflict that intensifies during the quantum discomfort zone. Part of you is desperate for change, while another part is terrified of change. Part of you knows you're ready for something bigger, while another part insists you're not qualified or prepared. This isn't a problem to solve. It's a tension to navigate. You don't need to eliminate the fear or convince the resistant parts of yourself. You just need to act from the part of you that knows, while acknowledging the parts that don't. Think of it like learning to drive. Your hands might shake the first time you get behind the wheel, but you don't wait for the shaking to stop before you start the engine. You acknowledge the nervousness while taking the action anyway. The same principle applies to quantum leaps. You acknowledge the fear while following the aliveness. You honor the part that's scared while empowering the part that knows. This is what separates those who successfully navigate their quantum transformation from those who get stuck in endless preparation and analysis. Successful navigators don't wait for internal consensus. They act from their highest knowing while compassionately acknowledging their human hesitations. David, another client, put it beautifully. He said it felt like having two voices in his head during his career transition. One voice kept listing all the reasons why leaving his corporate job to become a full-time artist was financial suicide. The other voice kept showing him visions of the work he was meant to create and the impact he was meant to have. Instead of trying to silence either voice, he learned to thank the first voice for trying to keep him safe while taking direction from the second voice. He made practical preparations to minimize risk while following the guidance of his creative intuition. This both-and approach is essential during quantum transformation. You honor your practical concerns while not letting them override your deeper knowing. You take reasonable precautions while not using caution as an excuse to avoid necessary growth. The timing of when to honor which voice is crucial. During the early and middle phases of the quantum discomfort zone, it's often wise to listen more to the practical voice while preparing for eventual action. But during the late phase, when the pressure becomes unbearable, you must listen primarily to the knowing voice while using practical wisdom to implement its guidance. Most people get this backwards. They overthink during the action phase and underprepare during the preparation phase. They spend months analyzing opportunities that require immediate, decisive action. Or they make impulsive moves before they've done the internal work necessary to sustain the change. Learning to recognize which phase you're in becomes a crucial skill. Each phase has distinct characteristics that, once you know what to look for, become unmistakable. The early phase feels like background dissatisfaction, that you can still manage and ignore most of the time. You might find yourself daydreaming about different possibilities, but these feel more like entertainment than serious consideration. You can still function normally in your current situation, though with decreasing satisfaction. The middle phase feels like active discomfort that demands attention, but not immediate action. The dissatisfaction becomes impossible to ignore for extended periods. You start researching alternatives, having conversations about change, making small experimental moves. Your current situation becomes increasingly draining, but still tolerable. The late phase feels like emergency-level pressure that requires immediate response. Every day in your current situation feels like a violation of your authentic self. You can't sleep properly, can't focus on routine tasks, can't pretend to be satisfied anymore. Your body starts manifesting physical symptoms of the internal pressure. This is when decisive action becomes necessary. Understanding these phases prevents two common mistakes. First, it prevents premature action during early phases when you haven't done enough internal preparation. Second, it prevents delayed action during late phases when hesitation becomes more dangerous than movement. Jenny recognized these phases during her geographic relocation. She had been living in the same city for 15 years when she started feeling restless and curious about other places. This was her early phase, so she used it for exploration and research rather than immediate action. During the middle phase, the restlessness intensified into active discontent with her current environment. She started visiting other cities, researching job markets, having serious conversations about relocation. But she didn't make any irreversible commitments yet. The late phase hit when her current city started feeling like a prison. She couldn't walk down familiar streets without feeling claustrophobic. She couldn't engage in her usual social activities without feeling like she was living someone else's life. Her body started manifesting stress symptoms that hadn't been there before. This was her signal for immediate action. Within 2 months, she had found a job in a new city, given notice on her apartment, and made the move. The timing was perfect because she had done the preparation during the earlier phases and was ready for decisive action when the energetic window opened. Looking back, she could see how each phase had been necessary. The early phase built her motivation and vision. The middle phase provided practical preparation and research. The late phase supplied the urgency and courage needed for actual implementation. This phased approach is how consciousness navigates major transitions. It builds readiness gradually, then strikes decisively when conditions align. Trying to force the timeline leads to either premature action without sufficient foundation or delayed action past the optimal window. But there's another element that most people miss entirely. The quantum discomfort zone doesn't just prepare you for external change. It activates dormant capacities within your consciousness that you'll need to sustain your new reality. During this period, you might notice heightened intuitive abilities, increased synchronicities, enhanced creativity, or deeper access to knowing beyond rational thought. These aren't random side effects. They're your consciousness coming online at frequencies that your new reality will require. Most people dismiss these experiences or try to explain them away because they don't fit their current worldview. But these capacities are part of your evolutionary package. They're tools you'll need to navigate the reality you're moving into. Mark discovered this during his entrepreneurial transition. As his corporate job became increasingly unbearable, he started having vivid dreams about business ideas. He began meeting exactly the right people at exactly the right moments. Information he needed would appear through seemingly random encounters or conversations. Initially, he attributed these experiences to coincidence or wishful thinking. But as they intensified and became more precise, he realized something deeper was happening. His consciousness was accessing intelligence networks that his rational mind couldn't explain, but that provided exactly the guidance he needed. Instead of dismissing these experiences, he started documenting them, following their guidance, and developing trust in sources of information beyond his analytical thinking. This became one of his greatest business assets, allowing him to make decisions and recognize opportunities that his competitors missed entirely. This expansion of awareness isn't optional during quantum transformation. Your old reality operated within certain perceptual limitations. Your new reality will require broader perceptual capacities. The quantum discomfort zone is your consciousness upgrading its operating system to handle the increased complexity and possibility of your emerging life. Some people experience this as increased emotional sensitivity, feeling more deeply both positive and negative experiences. Others notice enhanced pattern recognition, seeing connections and possibilities that weren't visible before. Still others develop stronger energetic discernment, feeling more precisely which people, places, and opportunities align with their authentic path. These aren't mystical phenomena, though they might seem mysterious from the perspective of your old worldview. They're natural functions of consciousness operating at higher levels of coherence and integration. Dr. Dan Siegel's research on neuroplasticity shows that consciousness can literally rewire the brain throughout life, creating new neural networks that support expanded awareness and capability. The intensity of the quantum discomfort zone creates optimal conditions for this rewiring process. The discomfort you're feeling isn't just emotional or psychological, it's neurological reorganization happening in real time. Your brain is building new pathways to support the identity and capabilities you'll need in your expanded reality. This is why the process can't be rushed or bypassed. The internal infrastructure must be built before the external transformation can be sustained. Without this neurological foundation, you'd make external changes but then unconsciously sabotage them because your brain hadn't developed the circuitry to maintain the new patterns. Understanding this removes the pressure to make the discomfort go away quickly. Instead, you can cooperate with the rewiring process, supporting it through practices that enhance neuroplasticity while allowing the natural timeline to unfold. This is where the real mastery lies. Not in forcing transformation to happen faster, but in optimizing the conditions for transformation to happen completely. Not in eliminating the discomfort, but in maximizing the growth that the discomfort makes possible. The quantum discomfort zone is temporary, but the capacities it develops are permanent. The expanded awareness, enhanced intuition, deeper trust in invisible processes, increased tolerance for uncertainty, stronger connection to authentic guidance, these become part of your permanent operating system. This is why people who successfully navigate quantum leaps often describe feeling different people afterward, like completely. They haven't just changed their circumstances, they've evolved their consciousness to a level that makes their old limitations impossible to maintain. But this evolution requires your conscious participation. You can't just passively endure the discomfort and hope it leads somewhere better. You must actively engage with the process, learning its rhythms, following its guidance, developing the capacities it's trying to build within you. This active engagement is what transforms the quantum discomfort zone from suffering into sacred work. Instead of feeling like a victim of overwhelming pressure, you begin to feel like a participant in your own evolution. The discomfort doesn't disappear, but its meaning changes completely. You start recognizing it as the labor pains of your own rebirth. Each wave of discomfort becomes evidence that something magnificent is trying to emerge through you. The pressure becomes sacred because you understand what it's creating. This shift in perspective changes everything about how you navigate the experience. Instead of asking, "How do I make this stop?" you begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Instead of resisting the uncertainty, you start mining it for insights about your emerging self. The discomfort becomes your teacher, showing you exactly where your old identity is, too small to contain who you're becoming. Every situation that feels unbearable is highlighting an area where expansion is necessary. Every relationship that feels constraining is revealing where authentic expression wants to emerge. This is when you discover something extraordinary about the quantum discomfort zone. It's not random suffering, it's precisely calibrated pressure designed to activate specific aspects of your potential. The areas of your life that feel most uncomfortable are exactly the areas where your greatest growth is waiting to unfold. Think about how a pearl forms. An irritant enters the oyster, creating discomfort that the oyster can't ignore or eliminate. Instead of being destroyed by the irritation, the oyster begins coating it with layers of nacre, gradually transforming the source of discomfort into something beautiful and valuable. Your quantum discomfort zone operates on the same principle. The irritation you're feeling isn't destroying you. It's the raw material from which your masterpiece will be created, but only if you respond like the oyster, coating the discomfort with layers of wisdom, courage, and trust until it becomes the foundation of your transformed life. Most people try to remove the irritant instead of transforming it. They attempt to fix their external circumstances to eliminate the discomfort, not realizing that the discomfort is pointing them toward internal transformation that will make external fixes unnecessary. This is why some people can change jobs, relationships, cities, even entire lifestyles, yet still feel the same underlying dissatisfaction. They're treating symptoms instead of causes. They're rearranging the external while the internal remains unchanged. The quantum discomfort zone forces you to go deeper. It makes surface-level adjustments impossible because the pressure is coming from such a fundamental level of your being. You can't think your way out of it, distract yourself from it, or manipulate your circumstances to avoid it. The only way through is transformation at the level of identity itself. This is why it feels so intense and why most people find it so threatening. Your ego correctly perceives that its very existence is being challenged, not because something wants to destroy you, but because something wants to liberate the authentic you that's been trapped beneath layers of conditioning and compromise. Maria experienced this liberation during her creative awakening. She had spent 20 years in marketing, building campaigns for products she didn't care about, attending meetings that felt meaningless, climbing a corporate ladder that led nowhere she actually wanted to go. The quantum discomfort zone manifested as a growing revulsion toward anything artificial or manipulative. She couldn't stomach another presentation about increasing consumer desire for unnecessary products. She couldn't participate in another strategy session about exploiting psychological vulnerabilities for profit. Her body would literally rebel, creating nausea and headaches whenever she tried to engage with work that violated her emerging values. At first, she interpreted these physical symptoms as stress and tried to manage them through exercise, diet changes, and stress reduction techniques. But the symptoms persisted because they weren't caused by external pressure. They were caused by internal misalignment. Her authentic self, her creative soul, was finally strong enough to make actions known obj-its. The discomfort wasn't random. It was intelligent feedback about the gap between who she was becoming and how she was spending her days. When she finally listened to this feedback instead of trying to override it, everything shifted. She started spending evenings and weekends on creative projects that energized her. She began conversations with artists and makers who understood her emerging language. She researched ways to use her marketing skills in service of causes she believed in. Each step toward alignment reduced the physical symptoms, confirming that her body had been giving her accurate information all along. The discomfort wasn't a problem to solve. It was a guidance system pointing her toward her authentic path. Within 18 months, she had transitioned from corporate marketing to running her own agency that worked exclusively with environmental nonprofits and sustainable businesses. Her income, but her initially dropped, energy increased exponentially. She was using the same skills but in service of something that aligned with her values rather than contradicting them. The transformation wasn't just professional. As she aligned her work with her authentic self, every other area of her life began shifting too. Relationships that had felt draining naturally faded while new connections formed with people who resonated with her emerging identity. her living space evolved to reflect her creative nature. Even her physical health improved as the chronic stress of misalignment dissolved. This domino effect is characteristic of authentic quantum leaps. When you transform at else reorgan the level of identity, everything rises to match your new frequency. You don't have to force changes in different areas of your life. They happen naturally as your external world aligns with your internal transformation. But there's a crucial period during this realignment that requires particular attention. As your old life dissolves and your new one is still forming, you exist in what I call the void space. This is the gap between realities, where you're no longer who you were but not yet fully who you're becoming. The void space can feel terrifying, but it's actually the most creative space you'll ever inhabit. This is where miracles are born, where impossible becomes inevitable, where the quantum field responds to your purest intentions without the interference of old patterns. If you're feeling this discomfort right now, if something inside you is stirring with recognition as you've listened to these words, then your moment has arrived. Not someday when you feel more prepared. Right now, while your consciousness is primed for transformation. Trust the discomfort. Honor the pressure. Follow the aliveness, even when it terrifies you. Your quantum leap isn't coming. It's here. The only question is whether you'll surrender to the intelligence that's been orchestrating this entire process, or resist the very transformation your soul has been calling for. The universe doesn't make mistakes. You found this message because you're ready. Your breakthrough is imminent.